All right, we are back in Lightroom. Let's find another image. Oof, not that one. Maybe something like this, where we know, I'm gonna reset it. We know we've got some issues. We know we need to do some burning and dodging on it. I'm gonna start at the top and do all of my basic adjustments in here. Now that makes it super yellow, so I'm going to hit W, which selects this white balance, and try and find something that would be neutral, like that bar. Hold down the Option key, set my white and black points, open up my shadows a little bit, bring down my highlights a little bit. Now, again, I can work here with the tonal curve, or I can go into Photoshop. So I'm going to say, let's try that in Photoshop. HSL, split toning, we don't need those right now. Detail, if you zoom in to 100%, there's almost no perceptible grain because I shot it at ISO 200. So we don't need to worry about noise reduction, but there is some pretty serious warping. So let's set our lens correction, and then also auto will bring it upright. Now you can see we have a little bit of the canvas showing, so we can just hit constrain crop. Okay, so now we want to go into Photoshop and we want to burn and dodge. We can burn and dodge with the adjustment brush in Lightroom, which we have been doing, and that's a way to make a localized adjustment. But we are now going into Photoshop to expand our tools. So I'm going to hit Edit in Photoshop, and then it brings up Photoshop. Okay, so we have our image. It's a locked background layer, and I'm going to go over to my adjustments and hit the curves, get the targeted adjustment tool, little scrubby hand here, and then if I need to, just I want to open this up a little bit, but I want to get a little more contrast here. Contrast is different from density, and that density is how light or dark an image is, and contrast is the difference between the lights and the darks. All right? So we've added a curves layer, looks pretty good. I'm going to make it a little darker. Okay, move this panel over here, and now I want to bring some more detail in here where it's a little dark, so I want to dodge or withhold exposure, lighten it up, and burn or add exposure. And in Photoshop, it is so simple to do. All you got to do is make a new layer at the top of your layer panel. And this is the little icon. It says Create New Layer. Boom. And it will go up here. Double click where it says Layer 1 and always name it. So if you're going to burn the corner, you can call it burn corner, dodge, whatever. But you're going to end up, by the time you're done editing your fourth project, with several of these as you go in and fine tune every section of the image. So you want to be kind of precise about this. Now, this is pretty fun. You grab the brush. The shortcut is B as in brush. Black is in the foreground. And then you just paint. Now it's definitely darker, right? But it's a little obvious. So this is called your layer blending mode. And you have all of these different options, and each of these options will darken or lighten the way that one layer appears when applied to another. So what we're going to do, we don't want it to be sitting on top like normal. We want it to blend. And soft light is a good choice for that. So if you look at the corner before and after, it's a pretty good way to bring in just a localized part. Now, typically you may go too far, but that's fine because you have the opacity. Right here is the opacity of the layer. And then when you take that down a little bit, you can still see that you got a nice rich shadow, but you don't see like, oh, no one's gonna look at it and go, wow, that part's way too dark. Because in a photograph, you don't want a part to be way too dark or way too light, or else it's very noticeable. And if you went over, say you just painted a little crazy over here, you could always get the erase tool, E, and clean up if you needed to. This is the only time you will ever use the erase tool in Photoshop, is on a blank layer where you have burned and dodged. All right. So let's make this section over here a little lighter. I'm going to make a new layer. We can also go layer, new layer, and I'm going to call it burn. Oh, sorry. Burn left side. And actually, this should have been called, yeah, no, burn two. Okay. So I'm going to grab that black brush again, B, and kind of paint on what I want to be darker. Change the blending mode from normal, where it's just these pixels, the paint is just sitting on top, and blend it in using soft light. Little dark, so let's take the opacity down. Turn off the eye to see the before and after. What you want to do by burning and dodging and using curves and masking your curves is to create your advanced lighting, but also make sure that when you look at an image, the viewer's eye is going where you want it to go, when you want it to go, right? Just because something's the brightest point, you might not want that to be the brightest point. You might want the viewer to enter the photo in a different place. And in this case, because you can't control the sun, right, and I didn't have a time of day option, I couldn't do anything about the fact that it got dark in here, but very, very, very bright on the edges. So I'm going to make one more layer, layer, new layer, and call this Dodge Cockpit. And for Dodge, you use white. X as in X-Men, puts it in the front. Big old brush. Okay. Change this from normal to soft light. And you can see, once you've done that, you can even add in some parts that might benefit from that. Now, I think that looks super weirdly not natural in any way, shape, or form. So let's bring the opacity of that layer down. Now, what it's doing is it's giving me enough detail so my shadow area is not pitch black. And I can even bring that down to maybe 10, 15% opacity. You just want to make sure that your shadows have detail and your highlights have detail. So now you have your background copy. We haven't done anything destructive to it. That's why we're using layers. It's a non-destructive, efficient workflow. We have an adjustment layer where we increased the contrast. We have two burn layers where we added exposure, and one dodge layer where we subtracted exposure. Now, when you're done in here, you can just go to File, Save. And you'll notice that it saves it as a TIFF. You cannot overwrite a DNG by saving this as a DNG, so you don't have to worry. It saves it as a TIFF. So when you hit Command Q to exit out of Photoshop and you go back into Lightroom, you'll see that now that thumbnail says 1 of 2. And the one that you edited, oops, should be right next to it. Now, if you want to get back into this file, and actually if you take a minute and just hover over, you can see that this is the DNG, and this is the TIFF. Right, see how that little info screen comes up when you hover just for a second or two? Okay, well this is the DNG because that was the original, but this is our TIFF. Now you want to get back into this TIFF because you're like, man, that middle is way too bright. This is how you do it. If you continue to do edit in Photoshop, you will open another copy and another copy and another copy. So what you want to do is hit Show in Finder. and it will show you in the Finder window where that file lives. And then right-click, open with Photoshop. And what that's going to do is prevent you from making several different copies unless you want to make several different copies. And when you open from the Finder, you have all of your glorious layer structure that you just spent all that time working on. Okay, so if you wanted to add a retouch layer or something in here, you could, and then just shut it down and it will update back in Lightroom.